This is yet another tale of a clueless loser, but surprise, surprise, a gal this time, meet Choi, whose life was akin to a never-ending nightmare. First off, her folks treated her like a punching bag. Then her dad pulled a fast one and vanished to get some milk. As if that wasn't enough, her boyfriend made it his daily mission to crush her spirit. And just when you thought it couldn't get worse, he left her in a secret dungeon where creepy crawly monster insects feasted on her day after day for an eternity of 1,000 years. God only knows the horrendous things they did to her. But thanks to a cursed trinket she stumbled upon, she couldn't kick the bucket even after being gnawed on over and over, leading to an ocean of pain and misery that never ended. After enduring all that for 1,000 years, she completely snapped, transforming into a raving lunatic, bent on sending everyone, especially that charming boyfriend of hers, straight to the grave for the hell he put her through. The story kicks off with a vividly gruesome scene where a poor girl is being devoured by hordes of insects wishing for death or someone to end her misery. But fate says no, as she suffers through relentless agony all over. She reminisced about the events from a few hours back, shooting to a scene where a band of adventurers stood in front of a massive gate. Their fearless leader debated entering, while the other adventurers urged him to reconsider, since no one had a clue about the hidden dungeon lurking inside the cave. But if they kept this under wraps and handled it quietly, they stood to pocket the loot, without anyone ever being the wiser. One more adventurer piped up, insisting she be let in too. Their leader Heath had a light bulb moment. Despite being hunters, their pay was abysmally low, barely above minimum wage, so they should dive into that dungeon and strike it rich, ASAP. But then, Choi, the leader's girlfriend, warned them not to go in. It could be super dangerous. Plus, failing to inform headquarters was a hard no, a punishable offense in its own right. Upon hearing this, Heath snapped at Choi, asserting that this opportunity would never come again, and everyone else was on board, so why was she the lone wolf doubting this? He dropped the emotional card, asking her if she really wanted to embarrass him in front of the team as their leader. Choi felt a little piece of her snap as she tried explaining that she wasn't trying to rain on his parade. She just thought this dungeon might be crawling with bugs like the last time. Heath let out a maniacal laugh, questioning how long Choi was going to keep flip-flopping over those bug monsters, triggering her memory of the chaos she'd caused previously. He told her that if the whole thing was too much, maybe she should pack her bags and leave the team, because they didn't need a C-rank tank dragging them down. But deep down, he knew there was no other guild that would want Choi without him. As Choi came to that same conclusion, she reluctantly agreed to venture into the secret dungeon. Heath was over the moon, thrilled that she was finally seeing the light, and just wanted her to follow his lead. Meanwhile, in Choi's mind, she realized Heath had a point. She was only in the guild because of him. She started feeling selfish and remembered Heath's words, who manipulated her by reminding her that he was her boyfriend, and doing all this because he cared about her. Convinced by his charm, Choi thanked him fully, believing he was the only person capable of loving someone like her. Realizing his manipulation had worked, Heath led the charge into the dungeon, instructing Choi as the tank to go ahead and scout the area so they could scope out the entire secret dungeon. The team ventured further in, and Choi felt she couldn't let Heath down again, but as monsters began pouring out all around them, they found themselves cornered. One adventurer gawked at the ludicrous swarm of insects. As chaos erupted and screams filled the air, the team attempted to trap and eliminate them, but with so many critters moving forward was a Herculean task. Meanwhile, Heath urged Choi to hold the line, promising to take care of the rest. Choi started using her tank abilities, trying to keep those monsters at bay, while solely focusing on hanging in there. She thought to herself that she had to maintain the line so the others could sweep up behind her. Even while getting shredded by the insects, she refused to panic because in her mind they were almost there. On the flip side, Heath and the others were flabbergasted by the monstrous quantity of bugs. They realized they were in way over their heads and started brainstorming their escape plan. The scene shifts again to Choi still clinging to her tank powers while multiple insects kept attacking her. It hurt so bad, and she found herself questioning how much longer she could go on. She spun around begging Heath for a healing boost so she could protect them even more because she was hitting her breaking point. But as she turned, her jaw dropped when she saw everyone else fleeing the dungeon. Her heart shattered as Choi realized that her teammates were abandoning her to fend for herself in the secret dungeon. She was still trying to hold on to her tank abilities while being overrun by insect monsters. The pain was so intense that she couldn't keep her grip and thought about how much longer she had to withstand all of this. Turning once more, she implored Heath to heal her so she could keep protecting the team since she was at her limit. But when she spun around, it was absolutely heartbreaking to see her teammates bolting for the exit while she was left behind in the secret dungeon. She started yelling at Heath, begging him not to ditch her and to work his magic. But the dude just made this super disgusted face and called Choi a fool, telling her to just hang tight. But that was all it took, and she left the safety of the line, sprinting towards them only to see Heath about to shut the dungeon gate. She was in total panic mode, not ready to kick the bucket just yet. But Heath, on the flip side, couldn't care less. One of the other team members gave him a hard time, asking if he had lost his marbles for leaving his girlfriend behind. But Heath was determined to slam that gate shut, and finally the door was closed. Choi tried to yank it open, but it was locked tighter than a vault. She started banging on it, hollering for her one true love to come to the rescue. In the meantime, she could hear the other girl chatting with Heath, trying to persuade him to open the door. But he was like, "No way, if we wait around for Choi, we're all toast." So he shut the door to keep the rest alive, hoping Choi would eventually understand the reasons why. As the girl turned back, she spotted the monsters creeping up on her and realized it was not a good time for a meltdown. Spotting the forest ahead, she took off, thinking she needed to focus on surviving until Heath could come back for her. As she dove deeper into the woods, she came across a massive insect skeleton with a golden glow emanating from within its carcass. Deep breaths, and then Heath would come back to rescue her. As the girl dashed into the heart of the forest, she stumbled upon a massive insect skeleton where a yellow light was glowing with a golden glow like the disco ball at a party gone wild. Choi noticed a tree that looked like a hand and saw a ring shining like a disco ball caught in a spotlight. She puzzled over its significance and pulled it out, wondering if this was the treasure her team had been after. Without a second thought, she slipped the ring on, convinced it would give her some superpowers to tackle the trouble. But the minute the ring activated, the elusive treasure the team was itching to snag. Without a second thought, she slipped on the ring, convinced it would grant her superpowers to tackle the beastly chaos. But just like that, the moment the ring flickered to life, a notification popped up revealing it was a parasite ring of X rank. For a split second, she felt euphoric, thinking she was saved. But then a flood of notifications started rolling in, warning her that the ring was a serious buzzkill for her growth and life, plus it would regenerate her infinitely. That meant she couldn't croak until the incubation was finished. A pop-up appeared informing Choi that the ring messes with the wearer's growth and lifespan. And get this, it regenerates the wearer indefinitely. Apparently Choi was now unkillable until this whole incubation thing wrapped up. Choi's face turned to a mix of disbelief and despair as she wondered if the ring was totally useless, except for this never-ending regeneration gig. How was she even supposed to deal with the monsters? But before she could think it over, supposed to use it to tackle the mayhem. But oopsie, it was too late, and she noticed a horde of monsters closing in on her. Before she could even process what was happening, the insect monsters lunged at her, biting her all over and making her scream in agony, desperate for anyone to save her. Fast forward to the present, and the insects were still munching on her like it was a buffet. She was completely helpless, just crying, as the ring began to glow faintly while a notification popped up to remind her that as long as the incubation was incomplete, she wasn't allowed to die. Choi took a deep breath. Then she was suddenly awake again with a gasp, wondering how in the world she came back to life. But those pesky insects were still there, pouncing on her again, making her scream even louder than before. Her situation was a complete disaster. The monsters had turned her life into an endless horror show, but no matter what, she couldn't kick the bucket because the incubation was still running. She didn't want to pop back up again, but there she was, regenerating and getting tormented by these monsters over and over and over again, more times than she could even count. Meanwhile, the insects were having a field day, feasting on her like she was an all-you-can-eat buffet. In the back of her mind, she still believed in Heath coming to save her. But those pesky insects weren't letting up, and the pain was unrelenting. As the scene shifts, notifications continue to pop up like crazy, documenting her numerous revivals while she was being devoured by the chaos raged on, and the pain was far from easing up. With the scene shifting, we see a flurry of notifications pinging away, announcing her multiple revivals as she was getting her groove back. After what felt like forever, Choi started to wonder, just how long she'd been trapped in this secret dungeon, maybe years or even decades. She contemplated whether a century had gone by, wishing for the sweet release of death. Was she cursed to live forever, becoming Monster Chow for eternity? Suddenly, she spotted her sword in the dirt and realized how foolish she had been for not grabbing any weapon. It just hit her that Heath had gifted her that sword for her birthday, but now she wasn't feeling any love for him. In fact, she thought he was a total jerk for leaving her behind to save his own skin. Even after she had pleaded with him not to go, he had pushed her in just for some lame treasure hunt and a few extra coins. Now Choi was stuck in this, her protest to not go, but he pushed her in anyway. It was all for a mere shot at some hidden loot and snagging a few more coins. Now Choi found herself in this sticky mess. Nightmare thanks to Heath's selfishness. At that moment, she lost it completely, vowing to take down Heath. Fueled with intense determination, she grabbed her sword again and started hacking at the insect monsters. After taking down just 2 of them, she felt a surge of strength increase by 2. She was baffled, wondering how it was possible to increase her strength points so easily just by taking out a few critters. She was eager to test it again, slaying another insect monster. Possible because she was racking up strength points faster than she could say monster mash just by taking out a few creepy crawlies. She gave it a whirl again, dispatching another insect beast and racking up an accuracy boost of +1. She realized she could get even stronger, taking down those creepy crawly monsters over and over, boosting her stats little by little, like a video game character on a power trip. Her battle wounds were healing, and the girl was cackling like a maniac, finally figuring out how to use that fancy ring she found. The lady was laughing her head off like a total nutcase, shouting at the insect monsters that she was going to rip them limb from limb. And then she planned to bust out of the secret dungeon and reunite with her sweet, charming boyfriend so they could live happily ever after. She sported a creepy grin while telling Heath to just hang on a bit longer for his princess. As the scene shifted, we saw Choi obliterating all the insect monsters who were screeching in pain while she continued to slice them apart like they were a piñata. But out of nowhere, one of those pesky insects snuck up behind her and stabbed her in the stomach with one swift move. It was a total shocker, and she couldn't believe how this insect managed to creep up on her. But then the ring activated, regenerating her while she bravely took out that filthy insect who dared to attack from behind. The sharp claws went right through her stomach, but Choi yanked it out and tossed it aside. While her skin healed and the wounds filled in, she found herself once again surrounded by a swarm of insect monsters. But this time, she wasn't scared in the slightest. In fact, she was itching for them to come at her all at once so she could rack up some major experience points. Suddenly, Choi noticed that the bugs seemed kinda scared of her and weren't charging in recklessly, which made her grin in a super creepy way as she decided to charge at them instead. Round 2 of the showdown between the girl and the insect monsters kicked off, and Choi was slashing their heads off with ease thanks to her ever-growing stats. It was utterly hilarious to her, and she wore a sadistic grin because she finally felt like she had leveled up stronger than ever. She wanted to keep this feeling going, and she knew that would mean more killing, more and more. She jumped into the air, winding up for a colossal punch, flinging her sword aside like it was nothing. With a maniacal laugh, she yelled at the monsters to just die already as she slammed her fist into the ground, sending all the insects flying in every direction and obliterating anyone dumb enough to be within arm's reach. The system chimed in that the Eternal Sanctuary was cleared, and all the critters in the dungeon were toast, taking Choi 9 million hours, or about 1,000 years. As she absorbed this info, she was crushed, realizing no one else she knew would still be kicking. But just then, a system notification popped up, announcing that she had been promoted to a Grade A adventurer. She couldn't believe she was finally getting out of the dungeon in one piece. She pondered whether to hunt down her team and tear them a new one for what they did to her. Meanwhile, the scene shifted, showing that not a single second had passed outside the dungeon. Time only flowed differently in there. The other girl from Heath's team was fuming, wondering how Heath could dare trap his girlfriend inside and slam the door shut, considering Choi was the one who loved him more than life itself. She wasn't thrilled with him barking orders at her, and when it came time to save her, he totally ditched her and let her meet her doom. Heath sounded like a maniac, trying to convince her that if they had stayed behind, they'd all be dead by now, and if she cared so much about Choi, she shouldn't have run with them and acted all high and mighty when she was safe. Meanwhile, another guy on the team told her that those who could live should survive no matter what, And since they were all higher ranks than Choi, it made sense they should be the ones to make it out, not her. She couldn't believe her team ditched someone just because they were weak. She was done with their nonsense and resolved that once they escaped, she'd spill the beans on what the adventurers did. Heath suddenly burst into a maniacal laugh, calling out to the girl named Nara, asking her what she'd do if they left her behind next time. He started messing with her head, asking if a C rank could ever escape a B rank dungeon on her own. She started to tremble, realizing Heath wasn't wrong, while the guy asked why she seemed so scared. Heath laughed dangerously, telling her they should just get through the dungeon without any fuss, and she should be grateful it was Choi who got left behind and not them, or her instead. But then Heath's sinister manipulation hit a wall when a massive boom echoed through the group and they saw the gate break in half from some immense force. Both Heath and Nara were left stunned as they turned to see someone familiar. Meanwhile, as Choi walked outside the gate, she was flabbergasted to see that everyone looked exactly the same, while it felt like an eternity had passed for her with the insects. Choi wore a truly maniacal expression. The team members gasped, noting the gate had been smashed by some serious force. Heath and Nara exchanged wide-eyed glances, realizing they were in deep trouble. Meanwhile, as Choi walked out of the gate, she was flabbergasted to see everything unchanged, even after nearly 1,000 years of being trapped with those ghastly insects. Choi had a genuinely wild look in her eyes, but I won't lie to you, she's a total knockout. She greeted everyone like it was a casual reunion, saying it had been ages since they last met. You could practically hear Heath's jaw hit the floor since he believed he could save Choi. But guess what? He left her in the dust. He was flabbergasted, wondering what on earth the girl was babbling about because only a split second had passed since they took off. The crucial mystery for Heath was how on earth the weakest girl had managed to escape unscathed when he thought she'd be pushing up daisies, leaving him to search for another stunning girlfriend. Choi flipped her hair out of her face and shot Heath a death glare filled with a millennium's worth of resentment. On the side, Nara was just standing there, jaw wide open, utterly stunned to see Choi still breathing. Heath went full drama king, rushing to the girl and wrapping her in a bear hug, putting on a show like he couldn't believe she was actually alive. He mumbled apologies, claiming he was super sorry he couldn't save her. But then, he tried to justify himself talking about the greater good and how there was no way to go save her. Surprisingly, Choi waved her hand like, "Hey, I get it," letting him know he had to make his great escape. The guy figured she was still under his spell, thanking her for being a total sweetheart about it all, but dread slithered into his mind as he finally caught a glimpse of the bloodthirsty grin on Choi's face. Something deep inside Heath tingled, and he realized something was definitely amiss. He inspected the girl from head to toe, noting her outfit was in shambles, yet not a single scratch on her. No way this was right. The dungeon was crawling with creepy crawlies. He was hit with the realization that she was up to something. But just as he started piecing it together, another adventurer swooped in from behind and thanked her for being so nice and letting the others escape. The guy beamed, telling her how relieved he was to see her safe because now they could finally take out the boss together. Meanwhile, Choi knew she couldn't spill the beans and started laying it on thick, acting all buddy-buddy and wondering why the guy hadn't taken out the boss yet. She feigned shock and gratitude that the team had hung around for her, immediately showering them with thanks. Heath's brain started heating up with the thought that maybe he was just overthinking it, and Choi was indeed all right. The dude began leading her away, claiming he couldn't just leave Choi hanging there because his conscience would never forgive him. While Heath felt like he was losing his marbles, Choi kept wearing that sinister little smirk, cooking up something delightfully devious for the crew. As the scene panned out, they found themselves in a dungeon forest with a C-ranked boss monster that looked like a deer. Heath was hiding behind a tree, telling everyone to gear up and get set to tackle the boss like pros. Meanwhile, the red-jacketed kid had a plan for Choi to distract the deer so they could wait for the perfect moment to strike. Heath also chimed in with a grin, instructing Choi to keep the boss's attention on her while they stealthily went in for the attack. To everyone's disbelief, Choi suddenly sprinted in like a flash with her shield. Everyone was left scratching their heads, wondering why she was charging in solo. Heath tried to yell for her to stop, but she was in her own world. She slammed her shield down, powering up with so much intensity that even the boss was like, whoa. Heath was left bewildered, unable to fathom why Choi was gathering all that rage from the boss, questioning if she had truly lost her marbles. Still, he couldn't pass up a free opportunity to score a kill and dashed behind Choi. But as he bolted towards her, they witnessed her make contact with the boss monster, and panic struck. Thinking she was in a tight spot, Heath reassured her not to sweat it, because this was just a B-ranked boss. He kept telling her that if she held the front line, they were all set to take down the boss together. But the boss was fuming and started attacking her. Instead of protecting the squad, she leapt away, leaving Heath and the others in hot water. Suddenly, the red-jacketed kid realized that if Choi didn't dodge, he was toast. The other girls stood there, mouths agape, completely shocked that Choi pulled something like this. Heath's eyes widened in realization that everything he feared was true. His girlfriend was not okay. Instead of panic, Choi was cackling, asking the red-jacketed kid if that hit really hurt. She kept up the charade of being the sweet lady, claiming she got so spooked that she dodged without thinking. But you could see that hint of sadistic glee on her face as she insisted she hoped they would grasp her reasoning. Meanwhile, Choi was riding that C-ranked bull monster, sending everyone flying into chaos, while Heath was just left wondering if she totally lost her mind. He needed to know what was cooking in her head. The girl swung around, halting the bull for a moment, and asked Heath what he thought she was up to. Heath just wanted her to stop messing around and hit the ground. But that just ignited her fury as she made Heath witness the boy she flattened, asking if he experienced the whirlwind of destruction she just unleashed. Both the other girls stood there aghast. They couldn't believe Choi just pulled off something like that, and Heath was just standing there utterly shocked, confirming that whatever he thought earlier had gone completely out the window. Instead of a hint of fear, Choi was laughing, interrogating the red-jacketed boy if that hit really gave him a sting. She was still playing the innocent card, telling the crew she got so spooked she dodged without a second thought. But with that sadistic laughter on her face, she assured everyone they would understand her logic in this madness. Choi continued her wild ride atop the C-ranked bull monster, making havoc all around, while Heath was still caught in confusion trying to figure out what was going on in her mind. She turned back, halting the bull for just a heartbeat, interrogating Heath about what he thought she was up to. Heath firmly urged Choi to stop joking around and get down, but that only made her angrier as she made Heath witness the aftermath of her latest chaos. The crew really thought she was just playing around. The adventurers fell silent, while the girl decided that this showdown was going to be the ultimate battle of survival. She smacked the bull on the back, and the beast went on a rampage, charging at the adventurers one by one, making them scream and scatter like scared chickens. A few moments ticked by, and we see that all three living members of the group were now panting, utterly clueless about what their next move should be. Heath told one of the girls that she needed to be the meat shield, while he would heal her from the back, since he also picked up a few basic attack skills. But the girl replied that she had never tanked against a boss monster before, so it was pretty much impossible. Yet Heath was feeling himself and told her not to sweat it, because if she didn't step up, they were all toast. Heath was so puffed up with confidence that he told the girl if she didn't want to be a crispy critter, she better listen to him since he was the head honcho of this little adventure. He assured her he had her back, and she just needed to be a good tank, because they were definitely getting out alive. Meanwhile, Choi was about to lose it with boredom, wondering when the others would wrap it up so she could unleash her chaos once again. The new battle formation was set to take down the bull, but it was all for naught as the bull barreled at them full speed. In the meantime, Heath wondered how Choi was managing to control a B-ranked upgraded boss monster when she herself was a lowly C-rank. But just then, his thoughts were interrupted by the bull's ferocious charges, and he yelled at the girl to hold the line. The girl started blocking and was surprised she managed to hold her ground. But she was in for a nasty shock because the bull wasn't finished and unleashed its second attack, breaking through her defenses and turning her into a whirlpool of gore. She got flung several meters away and crashed to the ground, her body contorted in ways that would make a pretzel jealous. While Heath was struggling to process what just happened, even Choi was taken aback by how ridiculously strong the monster was despite being only an upgraded B rank. She paused the creature for a moment and used her inspection skill, realizing that the monster had somehow evolved into an A-ranked being, thanks to some mysterious blessing. The girl couldn't wrap her head around how a C-ranked monster got blessed by someone, but then she figured that maybe the parasite's ring had some weird effects on the monster she was controlling. But she decided to put that thought on the back burner, because right now, she needed to deal with her lovely boyfriend before figuring anything else out. Meanwhile, the boy was dodging the bull's attacks like a pro, managing to stay alive a little longer. But as he ran out of steam, Choi cackled maniacally and asked if he was still hanging in there. The boy realized he had no choices left, since it dawned on him that Choi must have snatched a hidden item from a secret dungeon. And now that item had turned her into a total diva. Heath decided to apologize to the girl by bowing low and mumbling sorry. The girl was completely thrown off by his sudden apology, and he started to explain that he was the one who ditched her and bolted. He even slammed the door shut before Choi could catch up. And on top of that, he forced the others to buy into his excuse of it being a necessary sacrifice. The girl wasn't ready to forgive him just yet, so the boy pulled out all the stops, owning up to the fact that he had messed everything up and was genuinely regretting it. But just then, Choi chimed in, telling Heath that he didn't even know why the girl was mad. The boy was on cloud nine, thinking that the girl was finally going to spill the beans about her anger, and then he could make things right. As he looked up, he was relieved to find Choi back to her normal self, who said she was only upset about one little thing. He assured her that if he found out what it was, he would totally apologize. This is when the girl flipped into her maniacal self once more, telling Heath that his very existence was the root of the problem, and for that, he'd have to die to make it up to her. The girl didn't wait for the boy to process her words and ordered the bull to stomp him. And just like that, he was squished into a smear on the ground. Meanwhile, Choi was having a good laugh, giddy with the fact that her revenge was finally satisfied. But suddenly she heard En screaming, who was teetering on the edge of consciousness, wondering if she should let the lady live or kick the bucket. Nara was desperately trying to plead with Choi to spare her. Plus, the girl recalled that Nara had always opposed Heath's door-shutting antics. Choi smiled at Nara, promising she wouldn't kick the bucket if she listened to her from now on. But she also warned Nara not to confuse sparing with pity. She just didn't want to completely lose her own humanity, so she made up her mind to let her live. Both ladies started walking away while the bull was still face-planted on the ground. But out of nowhere, Choi turned to Nara and said she had one more thing to be wary of. When Nara asked what it was, Choi spun around and sliced the bull clean in half with a single swing, telling Nara that if she so much as uttered something stupid, she'd be chopped up just like that bull. En was utterly terrified, nodding along to everything Choi said. And after that, the girl burst into laughter once more, telling Nara that now they were on the same team. Nara pleading with Choi to spare her life. And how could she forget that Nara was the only one against Heath's plan to shut that door? Choi grinned, assuring Nara she wouldn't kick the bucket if she played along from now on. However, she added that showing mercy wasn't an act of sympathy, but rather she wanted to keep a shred of her humanity intact. So with that in mind, she decided to take the high road. Both ladies started to stroll away, leaving the bull still groveling on the ground. But then Choi suddenly warned Nara about one more thing, and when Nara asked what that was, Choi spun around and sliced the bull in half with a single swift move, telling Nara that if she said anything foolish again, she'd absolutely face the same fate as the bull. Nara was petrified, eagerly agreeing to every word out of Choi's mouth. After that, Choi burst into laughter, declaring that they were officially on the same squad now. Choi spun around and sliced that bull right in half with just one swing of her sword, warning Nara that if she uttered something silly, she'd be in for the same fate as that poor bull. En was totally freaked out, nodding along to everything Choi was saying. But then the girl burst into laughter again, telling Nara that hey, now they were a team. But if the girl backstabbed her, she'd be pushing daisies for sure. After their little chit-chat wrapped up, Choi suddenly remembered they still needed to snag those mana stones. And before she could spit out another word, Nar sprang into action, scooping up the mana stones like they were candy. Meanwhile, outside a dungeon portal, a bunch of adventurers were twiddling their thumbs eagerly, waiting for their team to show up. They were stunned to see only two ladies who barely ranked above beginner level stumbling out of the portal. Choi's crew was part of the Hanson Guild, and the dungeon management squad was scratching their heads, wondering where the rest of the party had gone. Choi flashed a slight grin and nonchalantly informed everyone that the rest had met their maker. As she sauntered away, Nar took the reins, explaining to the dungeon management crew that the boss monsters had suddenly leveled up, and instead of helping out the newbies, the others got wiped out instead. That got a chuckle out of Choi. Nar quickly changed the subject, telling the dungeon team that instead of laughing, Choi was actually a fountain of tears and couldn't handle it. She spun around, announcing that since everyone was in a bit of a pinch, they'd ditch the mana stones and charge in first. But then out of the blue, another figure emerged from a nearby cabin, questioning how 3 B-ranked hunters bit the dust, while only 2 C-rankers walked out alive, especially since the dungeon wasn't exactly a cakewalk. The guy called out for Choi and Nar, demanding a detailed rundown of what had gone down inside. It turned out he was Han, the guildmaster, who also happened to be Heath's uncle. Choi shot Han a look of sheer disdain, repulsed that this guy was still hanging around as he triggered memories of Heath. Meanwhile, Han wouldn't stop berating the ladies, completely brushing off the monster rank situation, insisting their job was to back up the attack-oriented adventurers, and because they didn't do it right, everyone else got annihilated. Choi was unfazed by his ranting, while Nar was astonished, wondering how Choi could stay so chill when she was the one responsible for the others' demise. Nar realized if the guild members caught wind that someone was taken out inside the dungeon, they'd both be in hot water. On the flip side, Han was grumbling about his nephew's untimely demise, pondering what he would tell his father, considering their company was already in the doghouse. Just then, Choi spotted the flashy luxury watch on Han's wrist, coupled with a snazzy suit, and couldn't help but smile, zinging at him how he claimed to be broke with an empty company while flaunting money for frivolities. She pointed out that his watch was from a fancy brand and definitely cost him a pretty penny, and his car was a brand new high-end model that would put a dent in anyone's bank account. Choi decided to play innocent, shedding a few fake tears while sarcastically telling Han that while adventurers risk their lives for close to pennies. Suddenly, whispers of suspicion rippled through the dungeon management crew, with Han wondering what got into Choi, who usually just clung to Heath like a scared puppy without saying a word. Counting on still laying down the law with the ladies, he informed them they'd need to take the blame for emerging alive, while the others didn't make it. Their day off? Gone. They had to find a dungeon. Nar couldn't believe they were getting punished just for surviving, telling the guildmaster this was a bit much. But Han wasn't hearing it, telling her they should be grateful to even have work given they were low level, especially with many high ranks drop-kicked out of existence. Deep down, he was frustrated because just as the guild was finally stabilizing, his nephew had kicked the bucket, and now he was scrambling to find competent hunters without Heath. Yet he didn't realize he was blabbing aloud, letting everyone catch on to the fact that he wished Choi had bitten the dust instead. All he cared about was squeezing every last cent out of the remaining ladies. But just when he thought he was in control, Choi pulled a fast one coming up behind him and kicking him right in the jewels, leaving him with a face twisted in agony that even a scream couldn't escape. Every male worker in the dungeon management team felt that shockwave, while Nar realized Choi had officially lost it. But on the other hand, Choi was on cloud 9, glad the kick landed right where it needed to. Even as Han hollered for help, Choi shot back at him not to act like a wimp. And if he was really that broke and needed hunters, he should be the one to brave the dungeon himself. But since he was a coward at heart and despised dungeons, Han had no interest in going in alone, his fear for his life overriding any thoughts of bravery. Listening to all this, the man turned to Choi and asked if she... Suddenly, there were some suspicious whispers swirling among the dungeon management crew, and the leader wondered what had gotten into Choi, since typically she just hovered behind Heath like a nervous cat. Seizing the chance to discipline the girls, the leader told them they had to own up for the incident where they survived, while everyone else met their standing behind Heath and shaking like a leaf without a single wrongdoing to his name. Meanwhile, their boss was plotting to make the ladies pay for the fact they made it out alive while everyone else was toast. Their day off, totally gone time to hit the dungeon the very next day instead. Responsibility for the incident where they skated by with their lives while everyone else faced the Grim Reaper. Their day off was snatched away, and they'd have to find a dungeon to dive into the very next day. Nara couldn't believe they were being punished for being alive, shooting back at the guild leader that this was outrageous. But the man wasn't having any of it, barking that they should count their blessings for even getting work as low-level hunters, considering the hunter shortage caused by the high-ranking casualties. The guy wasn't listening to Nar, insisting she should be grateful they had work, even though they were lower level, given the hunter shortage. Sadly, lots of high rankers were pushing daisies now. Deep down, he was seething because just when the guild was starting to stabilize, his nephew kicked the bucket. Now he was scrambling to find decent hunters without Heath's help. Little did he know, Han was voicing his thoughts a bit too loudly, everyone catching wind that he preferred Choi to take a dirt nap instead of Heath, so they'd only have high-ranking folks left. But hey, there were still two ladies around, right? Han had been vocalizing his thoughts about wanting Choi out instead of Heath so they could just focus on the high rankers. But as it stood with only two ladies left, he was looking to work them to the bone to squeeze out every penny he could while treating them like dirt. Oh boy, was he about to get the shock of his life when Choi sneaked up behind him and kicked him right in his two prized jewels, leaving him with a face that could only be described as distorted agony. All the male workers in the dungeon management team winced at the thought, and Nara realized Choi wasn't just a little wacky anymore, she was off the wall. But on the flip side, Choi was delighted that her kick had finally connected in all the right places. Nara realized Choi had lost her marbles. But on the flip side, the girl was thrilled that her kick finally found the sweet spot it was meant for. And even as Han shouted for someone to help him, Choi told him not to act like a wimp. If the cash flow was tight and hunters were few, then he should be the one diving into the dungeon himself, instead of being a scaredy cat. But since it sent shivers down his spine, and Han was more terrified than a mouse in a cat convention, he couldn't bear to venture inside alone, fearing for his life. Hearing all this, the guy turned to Choi and was acting all sorts of crazy and thought that now that Heath was out of the picture, the girl was finally revealing her true self. But when she said that, the girls erupted into laughter like a bunch of Mad Hatters. It was clear that Han was definitely Heath's uncle, because they were all behaving in such a similar way, even using the same lines. Choi was still sporting that sadistic grin while telling Han that his entire family was a hot mess, which had her cracking up. The girl plopped down next to the man and told him she was downright insane for not kicking the bucket instead of his precious nephew. The man instantly sensed something was off and asked her what she meant. The girl laughed again, telling Han that it was precisely what he thought. Now that she was through with Heath, she wanted him to keep that name out of his mouth forever. To top it off, Choi announced she was leaving the guild for good. This hit Han the hardest because he knew if the girl bolted too, the guild would be doomed. Choi burst out laughing again, telling the man he should have treated her better while she was still within the guild if he wanted to have chats like these. But since the man wasn't backing down, the girl threw him a challenge, asking if he wanted another roundhouse kick similar to the last mind-boggling one aimed at his precious. Choi had already made up her mind to take off. But then, she had a light bulb moment and pulled out a bill, tossing it onto the ground, while telling the man that since there wasn't much left of Heath himself, the cash was a consolation gift for him. The girl wanted him to take care of Heath on his final ride. After saying that, the girl started to leave with N saying she was really beat, and even Na turned around to thank the man for everything until now. But since the guild leader was still snoozing, Nara wondered if he would manage just fine on his own in the dungeon. Meanwhile, we shift scenes to Nara's place where Choi was crashing and trying on a new t-shirt, asking the girl if she liked rock bands. Nara was like, no way, and explained to Choi that she had snagged those clothes from an outlet, selling them cheap because it looked cool. Choi was all about starting to wear outfits like that from now on. Nara was taken aback, wondering what she used to wear before this. Choi sighed, saying that Heath was a controlling jerk who didn't want her looking good in trendy clothes. But Nara perked her up, saying they shouldn't even discuss him since he was already pushing up daisies. Upon hearing that, Choi giggled with pure joy, thrilled that Heath was history, and she was the one who sent him to the afterlife. Meanwhile, Nara felt a bit freaked out watching Choi going wild, slamming onto the pillow like a lunatic. She abruptly switched topics, asking why Choi was suddenly crashing at her pad when she had her own place. After pondering for a bit, Choi said she wanted to hang out at Nara's because she had been living with Heath and didn't want to go back. Even though Nar was hesitant about letting a total nutjob move in, Choi was over the moon thanking N. But Nara still couldn't shake off the question of how they were going to get by with no money, since they both ditched the guild, and she wanted to know if Choi had any guild in mind to jump back into. But the girl cluelessly informed Nara that she wasn't planning to rejoin any guild. The lady was shocked, thinking about how Choi intended to pay for her living expenses, and Choi just laid it down, saying that since she had already stashed away 20 million in her account, she'd manage for now. Nara was flabbergasted, wondering why Choi was rolling with such small change, when both Heath and Han bragged endlessly they were covering her rent and living costs, practically letting her live for free. But that's when the truth came out. The uncle only paid the deposit, and they split everything else 50-50. Nara couldn't believe both guys were such scumbags that they lied even about the rent. Suddenly she realized that if Choi had no plan at all, they'd be stuck sharing her place forever, and that was a big fat no. She pressed Choi further, wanting to know if she was planning to find a place or get a job. But right now, Choi just wasn't in the mood for anything, as she felt she had already accomplished all she set out to do. Nara was blown away, asking how Choi had checked everything off her bucket list at such a young age. But then the girl sported a clueless but cheeky grin again, telling Nara that finding the adventure group and offing them was the... Choi started cracking up, finding Nara's reaction downright hilarious. But then her stomach let out a growl louder than a dog, and Nara asked if she was hungry. She realized she hadn't eaten a thing all day and wondered if there was anything Choi felt like munching on, maybe fried chicken or something else. But out of nowhere, Choi dropped another bombshell, saying anything they'd eat was cool since she never got to pick what she wanted. And Heath didn't let her eat this late, claiming she'd gain weight if she did. Asked her if she was just going to remain stuck in one place forever. And no way was that happening. She kept pushing Choi, wanting to know if she was scouting for a new gig. But at the moment, Choi couldn't be bothered. She had achieved what she'd set out to do and was feeling a bit lost on what to do next. Nara was left awestruck, wondering how Choi had managed to accomplish everything she wished at such a tender age. However, Choi's expression turned oblivious, yet sadistic once more, as she confessed to Nara that Choi had scored everything on her checklist at such a young age. Yet suddenly she sported a clueless yet sadistic grin, telling Nar that they really needed to find the adventure group, and Nara gasped in disbelief at this revelation. But now she felt genuinely grateful to Choi for letting her off the hook. On the other hand, the girl burst into laughter because Nar's reaction was just too good. But then her stomach rumbled like a monster, and Nara piped up asking if she was hungry. She suddenly realized she hadn't eaten all day and wondered if there was anything she felt like munching on, maybe some fried chicken or something equally delicious. But then Choi dropped another bombshell. Choi revealed that whatever they ate was all good because she never actually got to choose her meals. And Heath chimed in, saying she couldn't eat this late because she'd just balloon up. She figured if she put on some weight, she wouldn't be so eye-catching anymore. Just hearing that sent Nara's blood pressure skyrocketing, but at the same time, she was secretly gleeful, knowing Heath was completely out of the picture for being a total jerk. On the flip side, Choi was scratching her head, confused about why the lady was fuming, and Na simply pointed out that anyone would flip out if they had a boyfriend like Choi's, one who tried to control her life like she was a video game character. The girl was thrilled to tell Nara that she was the first person to get upset for her sake. But for Nara, it was just another Tuesday. Any random stranger on the street would be ticked off by such toxic behavior. Nara decided it was time to order some food to fuel up and catch some Z's. The more she mulled it over, the more nonsensical it seemed that Choi was expected to take hits like a tank, while her boyfriend had her starved. Choi suggested ordering some meat, so they decided to chow down and finally get some sleep. Fast forward a few hours, and even though Nara was snoozing, Choi was wide awake, wrestling with her thoughts about what she actually wanted to do for herself. It had been ages since she thought about putting herself first, and right then, she decided she had no interest in diving into dungeons or joining any guilds. All she wanted was to kick back live casually and snag a few odd jobs to pay the bills. Just when this relaxing plan was taking root, Choi's stomach suddenly felt like it was auditioning for a horror movie. She jolted awake, gasping for air and wondering what was stirring inside her. She had this uncanny feeling that whatever was going on in there had a mind of its own. She began to suspect it might have something to do with the ring she was wearing. As she inspected it, she thought maybe, just maybe, it was time to say goodbye to that little accessory. But just as she attempted to take it off, another system notification popped up, declaring that the X-class parasitic ring could not be removed once worn. Choi was dumbfounded. She had never heard of such a thing. Even though the alert warned her, she stubbornly believed she could take it off. With a name like that, it had to be a challenge worth tackling. However, the moment her fingers brushed the ring, a searing pain shot through her abdomen, making her feel queasy. Talk about a rude awakening. She was left guessing just how difficult it really was to pull off this ring after all. As she appraised it, another system notification chimed in, letting her know that the ring was messing with her life and regenerating her. Basically, she was stuck living until whatever was brewing inside her hatched. This time, she read the description, slowly processing each word and remembering she had seen something similar back in the dungeon. But the real nail-biter was wondering what on earth was waiting to hatch from her. Choi's imagination ran wild, picturing a movie where something raw and yucky was nesting inside a person, and once it popped out, the human was toast from the sheer agony. That certainly did not help her nerves. Still, she hesitated to fully buy into that grim scenario since the ring had saved her skin before. But the fact remained, she couldn't relax until she dealt with that pesky ring ASAP. First things first, she had to figure out what in the world this item even was. With the official channels out of the question, she opted for a stealthy approach, since the ring was an X-grade item. If word got out about how she snagged it, it would be a total circus. Meanwhile, Nara was still enjoying her beauty sleep, while Choi was on a mission to uncover what mystery was incubating in her. A few hours passed, and Nara couldn't help but wonder why Choi had bolted out of the house at the crack of dawn and raced to the hospital. Choi explained she had a stomachache and wanted to get checked out, but then switched gears and told Nara her shocking plan: she wanted to crash at her place indefinitely instead of finding her own pad. Nara's jaw dropped. Her immediate reaction was to flat-out refuse, but Choi couldn't understand why it was a big deal since she was ready to fork over the rent for living there. Nara shot back that their house was already too cramped, and there was absolutely no way they could live under the same roof. Choi thought about throwing out another idea, but decided to keep it cool. Instead, she suggested that if the house was too small, they could just upgrade to a bigger place and live there. This was certainly tempting for Nara, who had always called a tiny house home, yet she still passed on the offer. Finally, Choi pulled out her ace, warning Nara that if she didn't want a room together, it might lead to some serious consequences like death. Nara gasped, realizing just how intense Choi could be, and immediately stepped back. But Choi was relentless, insisting that she wanted to stick around until she saved enough dough and promised she wouldn't be a bother afterwards. Since she absolutely refused to set foot back in Heath's place, she had no choice. Nara started to see the light and was reluctantly warming up to the idea of Choi crashing there. But then Choi wanted them to pool their finances together, which was a hard no for Nara. And then it hit her. How was Choi planning to? She should just find her own place instead of crashing with them indefinitely. The lady was flabbergasted and denied it vehemently, but Choi couldn't fathom what the fuss was about since she was willing to pay rent. Nara told her that the house was already cramped enough. There's no way they could squeeze in there together. Choi thought of arguing more, but decided to let it go. Instead, she suggested to Nara that if the place was too snug, they could find a bigger house and move there. This sounded very tempting to Nara, who had always lived in a shoebox, but she still turned it down due to Choi's quirky nature. Finally, Choi played her ace, telling the lady that if she didn't want to live together, she'd just have to kick the bucket. Nara was taken aback, realizing just how intense Choi was, and quickly disagreed. But Choi insisted she wanted to stay with her until she saved up enough dough, and then she'd leave Nara in peace. She really didn't want to go over to Heath's house, so she had no other choice. Nara caught on and was sort of ready to accept. But then Choi suggested they pool their money together, and that was a straight-up no-go. Suddenly, Nara had a lightbulb moment wondering how Choi was planning to do that. But then Choi had this wild idea of pooling their cash together, which was just a no-go. But then it hit Nara. How was Choi planning to pull this off? Make money since she quit the guild just yesterday. But Choi coolly informed Nara that she was planning to snag a part-time job and rake in a fortune from that, or maybe even dive into some dogfighting. Nara's jaw dropped at that term, wondering if Choi had lost her marbles. But the girl was totally convinced that she could bring home the bacon for herself and Nara too, especially if she placed a bet on herself. Turns out dogfighting wasn't actually about watching dogs duke it out. It was about throwing awakened folks ranked C or below into the ring to battle it out. The bettors get to take home the cash based on who wins. To keep things on the down low, they called it dogfighting instead of an underground arena. Nara questioned if Choi really was a C-ranked girl because she had witnessed her power and knew that couldn't be true. In their world, it was a serious crime to hide your rank. But Choi was all about confidence, claiming her hunter license clearly labeled her a C rank. Plus, dogfighting was illegal anyway, so what's a little fib going to hurt? Nara finally went along with it and decided to back her friend, wanting to boost the odds and cash in big. Choi suddenly burst into laughter, finally thanking Nara for making some solid sense. As the scene shifted, we found ourselves in a convenience store where Nara was pondering the location of the dogfight arena. But Choi explained that even though the place looked like a supply store, it was still an arena just as her younger sibling had told her ages ago. Nara was flabbergasted at the mention of a younger sibling, questioning if Choi actually had one. But she brushed it off, insisting they should head in and register right away. Nara was concerned about what they'd do if they entered the wrong place. But Choi marched right in and called out to the receptionist saying she was looking for something. The receptionist asked what item she needed, and without skipping a beat, Choi whipped out her hunter license, flaunting that she was a C-ranked hunter. The receptionist wasn't having it and told them there were plenty like her who got hurt and couldn't even stand up, advising her to join a guild instead. But Choi was unaffected, replying that she quit the guild just the previous day and was ready for a break. Still, the old lady refused to let her in, saying they should join another guild first, since it was easier for them to find work than for the D or E ranked individuals who usually hit up the shop. But the girl was relentless, and once the receptionist took a good look at Choi, she realized that the girl had likely taken a life. Those crimson eyes revealed everything. The old lady had been wondering why a seemingly normal girl like Choi would risk her life for thrills. Choi had a fleeting thought about eliminating the receptionist, but quickly bit her tongue, telling the old woman she was uttering scary things without proof, insisting she would never harm anyone. But the lady finally told Choi to skedaddle, saying she was in the wrong place. Choi realized that merely talking wasn't going to cut it, so she leaned over the counter and asked the old woman what it would take to let them in. The receptionist caught on that Choi was hinting at a hefty bribe and started shushing her, gesturing for her to follow her lead. Suddenly, Choi asked if they accepted any kind of cards. The old woman snorted in annoyance, saying all transactions were cash only. Since Choi didn't have any cash on her, she would have to pay an additional 10% fee and should bring cash from now on to even step inside. Choi nodded in agreement, and the lady pulled out a receipt of payment, tossing it aside, and instructed them to head straight down the hallway hidden behind the store. Once they entered the fighting arena, Nara expressed concern that the entrance fee seemed a bit steep, but Choi shrugged it off, thinking it was a small price to pay, since they were destined to win a boatload of cash from fighting. As the mayhem of the fights kicked off, everyone was eager to place bets on their favorite fighters, but only cash was accepted. Choi was not thrilled that they hadn't brought any cash for participation. Then Choi turned to ask Nara if she had some cold hard cash. To her surprise, though, Nara was nowhere to be found. It turned out before Choi could say a word, Nara had scooped up all her cash and darted to the counter to place bets. Choi couldn't believe it. Nara, who had seemed so terrified, was now dead serious. The wildest part, Nara had brought a ton of cash and didn't mention a peep about her stash when it came time to pay the entrance fee. As Nara returned to her seat, Choi shot her an intense glare. Nara, puzzled, asked what she did wrong to deserve such a look. But Choi was fuming, pointing out that when she paid the entrance fee earlier, Nara had been totally silent. Thanks to her, Choi ended up spending a whopping $1 million at the store. Nara wasn't about to fork over any extra cash to Choi, reiterating that she was the one who chose to pay the entrance fee, not her. This sparked a cash squabble between the two, and amidst their bickering, someone chimed in, asking Choi if she was new here. As Choi turned around, just then, Choi turned around, asking Nara if she had any real cash. That's when Choi noticed Nara was MIA and started wondering where she vanished to. It turned out that before Choi even said anything, Nara had grabbed all her cash and zoomed to the counter to place some bets. Choi couldn't believe Nara was scared earlier, but now she was all business. The real jaw-dropper was that Nara had a stack of cash and didn't say a peep when it came time to pay the entrance fee. Now that Nara was back in her seat, Choi was giving her the death stare. Nara was puzzled, wondering why Choi was fuming at her, but Choi was mad because when she slipped the entrance fee earlier, Nara had totally zoned out. Thanks to Nara's quietness, Choi ended up blowing $1 million at the store. Nara wasn't about to cough up any extra cash, insisting that she wasn't the one who decided to pay the entrance fee. It was all Choi, and thus began their epic cash squabble. While they were bickering, someone asked Choi if she was new here. As Choi turned around, she spotted a dashing young dude with flaming red hair, asking if he could plop down next to her and catch the matches. Even though Choi was a bit hesitant, she gave in and told the guy to go ahead and sit beside her. As soon as the dude got comfortable, he began grilling Choi about who she was placing her bets on. Was it the fighter known as Desert or the fighter nicknamed the Sea? But it was then that Choi spilled the beans that she wasn't betting at all. She was actually going to jump into the ring herself. But just out of curiosity, she asked the guy who he intended to bet on. The guy replied that he was betting on someone who was definitely a powerhouse, and that powerhouse was Choi herself. Hearing her name, the girl raised an eyebrow, wondering if the dude had checked her rank somehow because people usually bet on guys. But this guy wasn't falling for any of those stereotypes. Choi, eager to know more about him, decided to use her inspection ability. But she was dumbfounded to see that all the info about the guy was covered in question marks, and her inspection skill was totally on the fritz. Currently, Choi's rank was A, which meant that this guy must be at the same rank or even higher than her. So she was left scratching her head about why a hunter ranked A or above would hang out in an underground fighting den, which was about as shady as it gets. Choi pondered just who the heck this guy was, and before she could fire off more questions, the guy turned the tables and asked Choi if she was aware of the participant level restrictions. And if it was true, then why the heck she was participating, since there was no way the staff wouldn't check the hunter licenses. So he kind of insinuated that Choi was a shady registrant. But girl was seriously getting frustrated, telling the guy that he was the weird one for snooping on someone else's rank without an invitation. Choi firmly told him to mind his own business and enjoy the match instead of being such a pest. Just then, Nar noticed the whole scene and jumped in, calling the guy Mr. They had legitimate hunter licenses, and there was no fraudulent activity happening here. The guy was taken aback, turning around, agreeing with Nar, but staying quiet about it. Nar, however, was fuming, telling the guy that if he was wasted, he should just enjoy the fight without bothering anyone else. But Choi was left in utter disbelief, wondering why Nar was calling such a handsome dude Mr. Nar wasn't backing down, insisting that the chap sitting next to her was definitely an old-timer who was turning into a tomato from being so drunk. But when Choi turned around, all she saw was a handsome young man, wondering if Nar might be seeing things. She wondered why Nar was calling such a good-looking guy Mr., but Nar wasn't backing down, insisting that the dude next to her was definitely a lot older. No matter how she squinted, he looked just as young as they were. Nar was on a mission not to budge, claiming the dude was a balding old man with zero hair. The guy couldn't help but chuckle, claiming that if they kept chatting about him like that, he might just have to take it personally. Meanwhile, Choi was scratching her head, trying to figure out what was up, and guessing the guy must have used some fancy item to hide his identity. Suddenly, her thoughts got interrupted as the bell for the next round started ringing, and the clash between the Desert Master and the Sea Storm was finally happening. As the match kicked off, Nar was pumped, thinking she was about to rake in some serious cash. But with the guy chuckling non-stop, her patience wore thin, and she snapped at Mr. to pipe down, unless he wanted to be shown the door, because her money was on the line, and distractions were the last thing she needed. Choi, in the meantime, realized the crowd was mostly made up of non-awakened folks or low-ranked hunters, and the guy was rocking a special high-level item that made him completely unrecognizable to anyone below a certain rank. Then the scene shifted to the participants, and we learned that one was E-ranked and another D-ranked. Looking at them, Nar started speculating about who would win and asked Choi for her thoughts. Choi told her that, in her opinion, rank was everything, and confidently stated that the D-ranked contender would take the prize. Nar perked up immediately, exclaiming that she had also placed her bet on the D-ranked fighter, but the guy chimed in, interrupting them, questioning whether they were absolutely sure they didn't want to reconsider. But Nar wouldn't budge, shooting back that he should mind his own business, since he wasn't even cute. But as the match unfolded, Nar's jaw dropped as the D-ranked fighter started getting pummeled by someone even lower ranked. Meanwhile, Choi was getting a kick out of the fact that the fighters in the arena were going at it like wild animals, giving it all a really savage vibe. But suddenly, one of the fighters went full-on cannibal, biting into the flesh of the other like it was a buffet. Both ladies were utterly grossed out, wondering if the lower-ranked fighter was actually going to win. But Nar wasn't happy one bit, because her money was on the line. On the flip side, the guy told the girls to stop deluding themselves and accept that they were wrong because the E-ranked fighter was definitely playing dirty and was about to snatch victory. But Nar refused to back down, insisting over and over that the higher-ranked fighter would surely counter the moves. But Nar's dreams of winning cash were dashed as the master of... The boy interrupted, telling the ladies to quit living in denial and just accept reality because that E-ranked player was totally playing dirty and he was definitely taking home the win. But Nar just kept denying, telling the couple that the higher-ranked player was going to counter for sure. Unfortunately for Nar, her dream remained unfulfilled because the master of the desert has finally taken the win and all the cash that was wagered on the sea storm is gone, including Nar's. She was in tears while the boy just casually mentioned that she should have listened to him. Meanwhile, Choi was cracking up, finding the whole brawl downright hilarious. But out of nowhere, Nar yanked on the girl's collar, demanding to know how she could possibly laugh after losing money. Even Choi had predicted that the D-rank would win, but boy was she wrong. Nar just ended up losing her money. However, now Choi's laughter had vanished, and she was zeroed in on the lady with some serious death stares, questioning what exactly she was doing. Suddenly, Nar realized the mess she'd made, and all her money woes disappeared as she began apologizing, telling Choi that she had lost her marbles for a moment and promised it wouldn't happen again. Nara quickly shifted the topic, asking when Choi would be fighting because she wanted to bet on her to score big bucks. But now that Choi was a bit miffed, she decided to bail, telling Nar that she had changed her mind. This left the lady utterly shocked as Choi started to walk away, while Nar was hollering at her, insisting she should help her make some money. But Choi was just thinking that Nar should be counting her blessings for not being flat on the floor after that stunt. More importantly, Choi was pondering the boy using some shady item to hide his identity. This could only mean he was either a criminal or someone way more important. As he turned to leave, Choi called out, causing the boy to spin around, asking if she had given up on participating, guessing she might actually have a conscience after all. Choi chuckled calmly and explained that since she had obviously been caught, she couldn't join the fight because of him, and now she couldn't make any money. The red-haired boy was stunned, questioning why he should take the fall for that. He advised her not to waste her fabulous rank in the underground arena, and instead join a guild or something where she could score more cash than from any seedy backroom brawl. But Choi just shot him an innocent smile, telling the boy this was just her hobby, and she was also curious about what he was up to since he was going as far as using illegal items. The boy suddenly went serious, responding that doing shady stuff was his hobby too. Considering he pretended not to notice Choi scamming people, he advised her to take a hike now. But the girl was not ready to let him off the hook, inching closer and asking about getting in on the distribution channels he knew so that she could snag some special items. Choi wanted to find out where he got everything, especially that identity item. However, the boy was not about to spill any secrets, asking if she planned on becoming a criminal. The boy had zero intention of sharing info with Choi about where he scored the item. The girl was taken aback, calling him really uptight. But suddenly both of them froze as they saw some officials storming the underground fighting arena, arresting everyone who looked even slightly shady. The boy got nervous, acknowledging that getting caught would be a hassle, suggesting they should hightail it out. But for Choi, this was the golden opportunity. She grabbed the boy's hand, insisting he decide whether he'd take her to the place he nabbed the item or go to jail with her right then and there. Then came the comedy scene where the boy was trying to wriggle free from her grasp, secretly wondering if Choi had lost her marbles, pleading with her to let go of his hand. But Choi was living her best life, reassured him that she was never gonna let go, even if it meant her doom. The very fear the boy held became true when one of the officials spotted him and ordered his crew to come over and arrest them. Choi, on the other hand, was playfully shouting to the officer to take them away so they could enjoy some quality jail time together. Just then, a massive explosion erupted inside the convenience store, and both Choi and the boy bolted out of there, racing at lightning speed, with the boy way faster than even Choi, who struggled to keep up, while wondering if the boy was allowed to destroy buildings like that. But he was dead serious this time, telling her to just keep up and follow him. He was curious about Choi's intentions at the black market, or if she was truly aiming to go full-on criminal. Choi clarified that she had no such plans, just wanted to get her item appraised, and if anything useful popped up, she might snag it. She then changed the subject, asking the boy what his rank was, but he coolly told her to have a look for herself. But Choi frowned, revealing she couldn't see any rank or information on him at all. Hearing that the boy was caught off guard, but suggested that if it bothered her, she should just level up. Choi was astonished, thinking he was making all the tough stuff sound ridiculously easy. They were sprinting through the evening, and by now it was nearly night, yet they kept running. Choi was genuinely worn out, realizing the boy was even faster than her, concluding he definitely wasn't just an A rank with that kind of stamina. She pondered if he might actually be an S-ranked something, but brushed the thought off and asked him how much further they were going. Whatever fears the boy had came true when one of the officials spotted him and ordered his goons to swoop in and take them away. Even Choi yelled at the officer to round them up so they could enjoy some quality time in jail together. But just then, boom! There was a massive explosion inside the convenience store, and both Choi and the boy bolted out of there faster than the speed of light, with the boy outpacing Choi, as if she were standing still. Choi wondered if it was even cool for the boy to be wrecking buildings like that, but the boy was dead serious and urged her to hurry up and keep up. He was curious about what Choi was planning on doing at the black market, or if she was aiming to be a full-on criminal. Choi spilled the beans, saying she just wanted to get her item appraised, and if something useful popped up, she might just buy it. Choi then changed the subject, asking the boy about his rank, but the boy coolly told her to just check him out. But Choi revealed that she couldn't see any rank or details on him at all, hearing that the boy was caught off guard, but suggested that if it bugged her, she should just boost her own rank. Choi was shook, thinking the boy made complicated things sound too simple. The duo raced through the evening and into the night, still sprinting. Choi was definitely feeling the burn, realizing the boy was a lot quicker than her, and there was no way he could merely be an A rank with all that stamina. She pondered whether he was actually an S-ranked powerhouse, but then she brushed it off, asking the boy how much further they were going. The couple was sprinting through the evening, deep into the night, still dashing away. Choi was feeling wiped out, realizing that the boy was a total speed demon, and he couldn't possibly be an A rank with that kind of energy. She wondered if he might be an S-ranked player, but quickly shook that thought off and asked him how much farther they were headed. The boy spilled the beans that they had finally arrived, but Choi's jaw dropped when they realized they were face to face with a gigantic wall and nothing else. But out of nowhere, Choi watched the boy reach for a rocky slab, giving it a shove, while telling the girl not to call his name once they stepped inside. But Choi was utterly flabbergasted, informing the boy that she didn't even know his name, and was he really that famous? The boy was stunned by this revelation, telling Choi she was probably the only hunter on the planet who didn't recognize him. The boy introduced himself as Kim Dong, and looking at the girl, he figured they were about the same age, so he suggested they skip the formalities. Choi was game, and Kim kicked off the door while she inquired about his age. The boy was 26, and the girl chimed in that she was in the same boat. Then they strolled into the dazzling light shining from the newly unlocked passage. Upon entering the market, the girl was blown away. She couldn't wrap her head around a place that was this lively inside a cave. Choi mused if folks were truly free to dig up the strangest things, since the cave was wildly odd with its various sections. But Kim pointed out that it was hunters who created the black market. Choi's eyes widened, pondering if the self-righteous hunters would actually stoop to illegal dealings. The boy explained that a lot of people wind up in the black market because they become hunters with a shady past or commit crimes after awakening. So they had to hustle unofficially and dive into this shady business. Choi was curious about how Kim was so clued in on this place, and the boy confessed he had wandered around a bit. Now that she knew this, she began playfully teasing Kim, dubbing him a former crook. The boy refuted it, but Choi flipped the subject, wondering what Kim was up to now, since someone with his skills should be running a guild or something. Kim revealed he was already in one guild, and managing another solo was a no-go. Choi probed about which guild it was, but the boy just flashed a grin, telling her it was a secret. As the scene transitions, we find Choi in front of an elderly lady who is fixated on the ring she wore, claiming the ring looked suspicious because she couldn't sense anything from it whatsoever. The old lady wondered how Choi came into possession of this item, and the girl responded that it was just a dungeon drop. However, it had turned into a bound item, and she couldn't shake it off her finger. The old lady's eyes widened with disbelief. Even in her extensive lifetime, she'd never heard of a bound item, insisting that no matter what items should be removable. but Choi shot back explaining that if it came off this easily, she wouldn't have come to the black market for an appraisal. The boy was eavesdropping while Choi asked the old lady if there was any way to remove the item. The elderly woman pondered and revealed it was the first time she'd seen something as peculiar as this ring. Choi was nearly at her wit's end since she couldn't wrap her head around it. But just then, the old lady asked if she should take a stab at removing it instead. The girl nodded, but as soon as the old lady made an attempt, Choi felt an intense cramping sensation in her stomach. As the girl started to groan, the lady froze her face, a mix of shock and surprise. Choi explained that every time she tried to get the ring off, it felt like she was getting stabbed for no reason, and it had happened the night before too. The old lady realized Choi had a seriously strange item, and it dawned on her that she couldn't appraise it on her own. However, the old lady was still dying to at least know its name and asked Choi what it was. Stuck between a rock and a hard place, Choi decided to tell the old lady that the item was just called Unknown because she couldn't find any legit info about it. Choi knew she couldn't go around spilling the beans just yet. And the old lady got that the item was out of her league, so she decided not to charge for the appraisal. Choi felt a twinge of sadness. It wasn't anyone's fault. She stood up saying she had to take off, but then her gaze caught a glimmering pair of earrings. Ironically, their name was quite the opposite. As Choi got a closer look at the item, she discovered they were shadow earrings designed to conceal the wearer's stats, except they wouldn't work on anyone more than 2 ranks above the wearer. Choi had hit the jackpot. She knew with these even S ranks wouldn't be able to sniff out her rank. Choi asked the lady about the price of the earrings, and she replied it was 300. But the old lady couldn't understand why someone of a low rank would need an identity concealer, asking Choi if she was really sure about purchasing this. But Choi was over the moon with the earrings and was determined to buy them, asking the lady if she accepted card payments. The old lady was utterly bewildered, pondering if Choi was genuinely this naive. Just then, Kim swooped in, covering the cost in cash, opting to pay for it instead. After the transaction was completed, Choi slipped on the earrings and asked Kim if he could still see her rank. Kim grinned and confirmed he couldn't anymore. She checked her rank, which was mysteriously hidden away at the S rank, and naturally she couldn't see it. The girl was aware that her earrings stopped working at S+ class and above, but she didn't think she'd bump into someone like that anytime soon. The boy scratched his head, wondering why that couldn't be the case, and was itching to chat more about it. But out of nowhere, Choi spotted something super interesting and bolted away from Kim. Talk about fast. While the girl was digging through new items, she pondered about trying a different appraiser for the ring. But if she kept hopping from one person to another, gossip would definitely start spreading. Nevertheless, she couldn't just ditch the ring either. So she started racking her brain for alternatives. That's when another light bulb flickered on in her head. As it dawned on her that she could sneak back into the hidden dungeon, she thought she might stumble upon a solution if she revisited it. She knew that only 11 hidden dungeons had popped up around the globe, and only one was unearthed in Korea. Out of those 11, 2 had shown up more than once. It's because hidden dungeons don't vanish when cleared. Instead, they just reset. So the one she entered where the creepy bugs were must have reset too. Choi resolved to explore as many dungeons as she could to find that hidden one where the ring originally came from, hoping to return it to its rightful place. But here was the kicker. She could only enter dungeons through a guild, and the last thing she wanted was to join another guild after her last fiasco. Meanwhile, while the girl was deep in thought, Kim was still lingering behind her, clueless about what the girl was up to. He couldn't help but get a flashback of that moment. He bought the item for her, telling the old lady that no way was the junk worth 300 and only 200 was a fair deal. Then she shot back, insisting she wouldn't go under 230, and called him a scammer. He shot back, saying the old broad was just money hungry and wouldn't even appraise a ring he brought in. Maybe it was high time she hung up her hat, but the old lady was clearly not ready to throw in the towel. Then she switched gears, asking if he had heard about any new dungeons popping up. Deep down, she knew if anything had emerged, she'd be the first to know. That's when a light bulb went off in the boy's head, and he had a ridiculous idea. Not wanting to haggle anymore, he handed the old lady the 300 she demanded and started to walk away. Fast forward to the present, where Kim plops down next to Choi, bragging about his newfound hobby of collecting unique items. but Choi was saying the ring was stuck on her finger no matter how much she wiggled, so handing it over was a no-go even if she were keen on it. Then out of nowhere, Kim grabbed her hand, insisting it didn't matter and that there was always a way. If they couldn't get the ring off, he joked about just chopping her whole finger off. Classic Kim. Choi realized Kim might genuinely have some quirky hobbies, especially when he pointed out that it was pretty strange that no new dungeons had shown up lately. Plus, she had an item he'd never laid eyes on before. That only meant one thing: Choi had certainly ventured into a hidden dungeon, which was about as rare as finding a unicorn. Choi suddenly felt like she was in a hefty pickle. She realized she was completely exposed. Now it made sense why Kim had stealthily dragged her to the black market. Maybe he was after that ring for himself. Kim was suddenly packing so much mana that even Choi was taken aback, realizing that just one rank difference was causing this much pressure on her. But the despair from that time she raided the insect monster dungeon still loomed larger. She wasn't about to bow down now. Instead of caving to a higher rank, she unleashed her shouting skill, which filled her scream with mana, causing everyone around to cover their ears from the ear-piercing noise. Even Kim was taken aback, unable to wrap his head around the fact that Choi was using her skills outside the dungeon for her safety. From all his experiences, awakened ones typically yield to stronger opponents naturally, but Choi was a different ballgame altogether. It felt like the instinct to submit had been brutally ripped away from her. Kim pondered whether such instincts were born or learned later on. Once the shouting burst faded, he peeled his hands away from his ears, and Choi flashed a grin, challenging Kim to snag the ring if he had the guts. At that moment, Kim felt this strong conviction brewing and figured it was best to let the matter rest, telling Choi that the jokes had gone too far and he shouldn't have even suggested it. Knowing full well that if anyone could track down that hidden dungeon again, it was definitely Choi. He chose to trust his gut and asked her if she really needed to sort out the item she had. If so, they needed to seek out the hidden dungeon where the ring originated together. That would speed things up. Choi was taken aback, wondering why Kim was suddenly willing to help her. As outside the dungeon, he kept her safe, because from all his experiences, whenever an awakened one faced off against someone of a higher rank, instinct kicked in, and they would submit to the stronger. But for Choi, it was a whole different ballgame. It was like the instinct to submit was non-existent in her, as if it had been forcefully yanked out. Kim found himself wondering if this instinct was something innate, or if it had been picked up later on after the whole noise fest was done. Kim pulled his hands away from his ears, while Choi flashed a grin. Talk about intimidating. She was practically daring Kim to snag the ring if he thought he had any guts. At that moment, Kim felt a wave of intensity wash over him and decided he didn't want to drag this out any longer, telling Choi that the joke had definitely gone too far and that she really shouldn't have pulled that stunt. He knew that when it came to Choi, she had a knack for sniffing out hidden dungeons like a bloodhound. Trusting his gut instinct, Kim asked Choi if she actually needed to go hunting for that item she'd found, because if it was necessary, there was really only one way to go about it. Kim suggested they team up and search for that hidden dungeon where the ring had come from, hoping it would speed things up a bit. Choi's eyebrows shot up in surprise, wondering what had caused Kim to suddenly decide to lend her a hand. Just then, the scene changed, and we spotted Choi back home with En, who was sulking like a kid who lost their toy. And Choi was left pondering if she suddenly had developed an aversion to her go-to food, telling Nar that if she really wasn't hungry, she'd just scarf it all down herself. But out of nowhere, Nara burst into tears, demanding to know where in the world Choi had wandered off to and how she could leave poor Nar all alone in that underground pit of doom. Plus, to top it all off, the building decided it had had enough and came crashing down, leading to utter chaos. That's when Choi hit her with the ultimate punchline, telling the lady that the team had ditched her too, and that the underground arena wasn't even as risky as the hidden dungeon. Nar had a light bulb moment, realizing it was true, though it still didn't quite compute for her. After a while, Nara finally stopped sobbing, and both of them dove into their food, washing it down with drinks. The lady asked Choi what her game plan was for living expenses since the dogfight arena was out of commission. They needed to start prepping for a guild job interview together, but Choi waved off the idea, letting Nara know she was going to hunt down that hidden dungeon again and would be home late for a bit. Nar was floored, wondering why in the world Choi thought it was a good idea to head back to such a sketchy place, and most importantly, how she planned to pull that off. But Choi, in her chill demeanor, responded that she was just going to grind hard in dungeons until she found the hidden one again. Yet Nar knew Choi was flying solo, so she couldn't brave those dungeons alone. But Choi was grinning as she told Nar that problem was sorted because Kim had volunteered to tag along. At the mention of Kim, Nara's jaw dropped, wondering if Choi meant the S-ranked Kim Dong. Choi was taken aback, telling Nar she was impressed she recognized him just by name, considering she didn't even notice him sitting right beside her. However, Nar was still skeptical, telling Choi there was no way someone that powerful would be involved in a back alley brawl. The guy next to Choi was just some old dude throwing around impressions. Nara was fired up, ready to spill the tea to Choi, even pulling out her phone to show her a pic of the real Kim. She couldn't wrap her head around mistaking a middle-aged guy for an S-ranked hunter. Meanwhile, Nar still wasn't having any of it, insisting that there was no way someone that powerful would be caught scrapping in a back alley. The guy next to Choi, just some old dude playing dress-up. Nara, determined to set things straight, whipped out her phone and showed Choi a picture of the real Kim. Choi couldn't wrap her head around mistaking someone so obviously middle-aged for an S-ranked hunter. The age difference was like night and day. Nara began explaining that Kim Dong was part of the Phoenix Guild. She figured she was mistaking some middle-aged dude for an S-ranked hunter because that age gap was pretty clear. The lady started explaining that Kim Dong was in the Phoenix Guild. But realizing Choi wasn't even surprised, Nara opened up her mind, contemplating for a moment that maybe Choi was indeed speaking the truth and the old guy was just a disguise. Choi further informed her that Kim was sporting some item that changes his appearance and conceals his identity. Now, Nar was heartbroken, saying Choi should have spilled the beans earlier because she had been talking nonsense without knowing a thing. Choi brushed it off, saying it didn't matter anyway. But now Nar was too chicken to ask about joining a guild ever again, and Choi was left wondering what made the Phoenix Guild so special. Anyway, Nara couldn't believe Choi was this clueless, yelling at her that the guild was special in every possible way. Because getting into the Phoenix Guild meant never having to stress over living expenses again, thanks to their amazing perks. The Phoenix Guild was established by one of the only 2 double S-ranked members in the whole world. Among the current 8 S-ranked hunters, an impressive 3 belong to it. And with its immense power, it's said to have influence rivaling that of a nation. Indeed, the Phoenix Guild was the strongest guild on the planet. To get into that guild, one would have to beat impossible odds like 1,000 to 1. But while Nara was laying it all out, she saw Choi tucked into her delicious meal, wanting to know if it was really that good. Choi nodded in agreement. Nara urged her to eat more. As the scene shifts, we find ourselves on another day, with both Choi and Kim walking together, while Choi couldn't help but keep her eyes glued on him. Kim got nervous and asked what was up. Choi replied that it was pretty cool that he was a member of the Phoenix Guild. Suddenly, the boy was taken aback, wondering how she figured that out when he was trying to keep it under wraps. Out of the blue, Kim spotted a shield behind Choi's back, questioning why she was bringing that along. But to Choi, it was second nature, and she wondered if they weren't heading into a dungeon. The boy simply smiled, telling Choi that she'd get to see it all and get the full picture once they ventured inside. But Choi was getting a bit irked by this cloak and dagger routine, demanding Kim spill the beans already. But the boy, on the other hand, just wanted her to keep up and move it. And lastly, he warned her not to let her guard down, no matter what, because illegal dungeons were way more perilous than anyone in their right mind could imagine. As the scene shifts, we see the duo finally step inside the dungeon, where they were blasting various lizard soldiers into bits with a single shot. We learn that these lizard monsters were F-ranked, and Choi was quite annoyed, wondering why Kim had told her to stay alert when these monsters were literally child's play for her. Kim erupted into laughter, unable to believe Choi actually bought his serious talk, telling her that most illegal dungeons typically feature monsters that are D-ranked or lower. Choi was on the verge of wanting to take him out in one hit, but she redirected the conversation, asking him if they really only needed to check out the bottom feeders of dungeons to sniff out the secret ones. Kim told Choi it didn't matter, since most of those hidden gems were chilling in lower-tier dungeons anyway, and that's why they had to comb every nook and cranny, even if it meant breaking a few laws. But that shield was really grating on the kid's nerves, so he told Choi to stash it in her inventory. He still couldn't wrap his head around the fact that Choi was playing dress-up as an ranker just lately and was clueless about most things. As the scene shifts, we see Choi unable to believe her eyes that the dungeon was wrapping up as she stared at the lizard general boss monster of E rank. The kid was cracking up because they hadn't even stumbled upon the hidden dungeon yet, and the boss monster was already making an entrance. The boy pondered what their next move should be, thinking they should poke around a bit more in the dungeon before they took down the boss, just to be absolutely sure there were no hidden digs lurking about. But Choi was really getting fed up with the boss's screechy voice. She leaped at the creature, taking its head clean off in one swift motion. And while the monster was left reeling, Choi told Kim there was no point in wasting time poking around the dungeon solo, because if the hidden dungeon hadn't shown up by now, it probably wasn't in this one. So they should bounce since the girl was running short on time. They should just head over to a different dungeon when they could. As the scene shifts boom, we suddenly get a peek back at the hidden insect monster dungeon where a horde of creepy crawlies was trying to make a snack out of the girl while she yelled for Heath to help her heal because she felt like she was about to hit the floor. Just then, she felt a hand on her shoulder, and it was Heath telling her to take one for the team, because that was the whole deal behind Heath's family sponsoring Choi in the first place. And before the girl could process any more of this madness, Heath shoved her towards the bugs, telling her to at least earn her keep. The girl was utterly lost, not grasping what was happening, as she was thrown right at a swarm of insects. The girl jolted awake with a gut-wrenching scream from the nightmare that just hit her. After calming down a tad, she glanced at her hands, which were still shaking. She couldn't believe that even after kicking the bucket, Heath was still showing up in her dreams like it was his full-time job. Meanwhile, as Choi turned around, she noticed Nara was sleeping like a baby, and she couldn't fathom how that was possible when she hadn't caught a decent wink in days. Choi thought maybe once Nara got her riches, she would pull a fast one and ditch her too. But offing the lady was always an option. But Choi figured now was not the time. She thought maybe once she dealt with the little bundle of joy in her belly, she wouldn't have to dive into any more dungeons or be tied. She couldn't believe it, Heath, even after being dead, still popping up in her dreams like a stubborn pop-up ad. Turning around, Choi noticed Nara was sleeping like a log, which was a total mystery because she herself hadn't slept well in days. Choi pondered that even now, as Nara struggled to get by, she might just ditch her once she hit the jackpot. But hey, killing Nara was always an option on the table. Of course, Choi decided that now wasn't the time for that. Maybe once she dealt with the little creature growing inside her soundly, and it made zero sense to her as she hadn't slept right in days. Choi was musing that even if Nara was struggling to survive right now, she'd probably bail on her once she hit the jackpot. But hey, offing the lady was always an option, just not now. Maybe once she handled what was cooking in her belly and didn't have to deal with any dungeons again, she'd think ditch her as soon as she struck gold. But offing the lady, that was always on the table. Still, Choi was convinced this wasn't the right moment. Maybe once she took care of the little situation brewing in her belly, she'd actually consider putting N 6 feet under. But for now, as the scene changes, it turns out the girl was wide awake, and Nara was seriously running late for her appointment. Choi wondered where she was off to, and the lady informed her that she was heading for a guild interview. Nara was really feeling the heat because the alarm played hooky, so Choi offered her a lift to the place. Nara was puzzled, scratching her head and wondering about what the girl was talking about when she didn't even have a car. But she was in for a fantastic surprise when she stepped outside and spotted none other than Kim Dong, who was lounging by the gate of their house, waiting for Choi to show up, instantly recognizing Nara as the friend Choi always blabbed about. Kim greeted her and asked if she was doing well. Meanwhile, the lady was in a full-on sweat, freaking out about how Kim knew where she lived. But Choi just popped in to say that since he was the same age as the gals, she could just chill and talk casually. But Kim was not having it at all, wondering who gave Choi the authority to decide that. On the flip side, Nara was still panicking, replaying the underground arena incident in her mind and telling the boy that she didn't mean anything she had blurted out in a moment of arrogance. But before she could even finish a single thought, she was out cold, her last words begging Kim to spare her life. Choi couldn't wrap her head around the fact that Nara passed out just from eyeballing Kim. Even the boy was taken aback, chuckling as he told the girl she had a pretty funny friend. As the scene shifts, we see the trio cruising in a luxury ride where Nara was finally coming around, and Choi was asking her where they should drop her off. With the little brain power she had regained, Nara told her they should drop her off near the traffic light across the street. The boy was intrigued, asking her which guild the interview was for. Once she dropped the guild's name, Choi realized that the guild leader had recently returned from a hidden dungeon, and thanks to that, the guild had grown by leaps and bounds. But Choi was curious as to why they weren't hunting down dungeons alongside another guild. Kim told her he didn't like them, so he had no intention of doing that. But Choi playfully teased him, wondering if things were heating up between the couple enough that the boy even wanted to stake his claim on her fingers. And Kim was just pleased that at least they were working together. But Choi, on the flip side, told him he was the one who needed her help instead. Hearing, Kim was over the moon, happy that at least they were on the same page for once. But Choi, being the firecracker she was, reminded him that she was the one cooperating with him. Thank you very much. This squabble Nar was just praying to the gods that things didn't spiral out of control and that Choi wouldn't turn back into a monster. As the scene changes, we see two guys in sharp suits rolling out the red carpet for Kim at the dungeon gate. The kid asked them about the status of the dungeon. The guys told him they could walk right in without a hitch, and Choi was curious about who these black-suited goons were. Kim informed Choi that these fellows were the guild members managing the dungeon entrance. Just because a dungeon is illegal doesn't mean it lacks management. Choi was constantly battling with the urge to take the kid out once and for all. But they were playing nice because it benefited both of them. The kid also knew that if Choi did anything to him, she'd be in deep trouble too. The girl switched her smile again, telling Kim they should find the hidden dungeon ASAP and then hit the road separately. But the look on her face was so captivating that both the suited guys and Kim felt their hearts do a little jig. Kim quickly spun around and gave the management guys a stern talking to telling them to keep their eyes peeled for any peeping toms outside. The kid turned around puzzled about why he was feeling this way. Then he steeled himself to go into the dungeon and search again that day. Meanwhile, Choi was wondering why the kid was taking so long, just wanting to finish this whole mess quickly. But suddenly, something felt off in her gut. She wondered what was going on and why she was feeling this way out of the blue. Choi thought maybe she was just imagining things, but it felt like more than just coincidence, especially since she'd been having wacky dreams at night too. Now she thought maybe Kim was on point, and she really should rip the finger off if she wanted the ring to come off. But out of nowhere, Kim appeared behind her like a superhero and asked what she was doing, standing there like a statue. Choi realized the kid was inside and immediately snapped at him, demanding to know why he was so late if he didn't want to bite the dust. But the kid was all chill, apologizing to her and strutting ahead like he ran the place. Choi was just really confused, still hell-bent on gathering more intel about the ring. Even if she pried the ring off, what was inside of her wasn't just gonna vanish like that. To tackle the issue at its core, she had no choice but to find that hidden dungeon super quick. The grinding had been going on for a whole month, and both Choi and Kim were still tussling with monsters inside the dungeon. This time they were up against a horde of three-eyed bird monsters. But to Choi, they were a joke because she could take their hearts out in one swing. Choi was so powerful she could tackle the entire bird army single-handedly. Kim couldn't wrap his head around why she was so fired up that day, wondering if something had gone down with her. He figured they might not stumble upon the hidden dungeon that day either. But as he called out to Choi, she suddenly whipped around as if something possessed her, ready to take a swing at the kid and take him out in one go. But Kim was way stronger than she guessed and halted her punch right in its tracks. As he pondered why Choi was acting like a feral beast all of a sudden, he thought she might be challenging him to a duel. The kid just grinned while deciding not to hold back, grabbing Choi and tossing her a few meters away with a little flick. As Choi felt that jolt, she suddenly jolted awake, wondering what she had just been doing and why she'd gotten so riled up out of nowhere. Kim was back to his normal self, telling Choi she looked beat and should take a breather while he handled the boss. As Kim walked away, Choi pondered what in the world was happening to her and what on earth did she just do. She was second-guessing everything, wondering if searching for the hidden dungeon was the right move after all. Because the longer this quest dragged on, the weirder her body felt, almost like the thing inside her was gearing up to take control, and she questioned what she should do to fight back against it. The scene shifts, and we find Choi finally back at En's place with their favorite food. But as she kicked off her shoes, she spotted En's tear-streaked face and wondered what had made her cry that much. We learned that the lady got rejected again, and wow, trying to snag a job in this inflated economy is tough. But putting that aside, Nara asked Choi what went down today, and she replied that nothing's changed. It was just a continuous string of dead ends. A month had passed, and neither had made any headway in their lives, so Choi figured they should chow down and forget about it for a bit. Nara's eyes lit up when she saw her favorite dish, and they opted to drink and party again. But now that Nara had lost it a bit, she was spitting fire at all the employers ranting about why job hunting was such a colossal pain. She figured it was probably because she was just a buffer and a low-ranked one at that. She was cursing her luck and questioning why she even awoke as a buffer in the first place. But meanwhile, Choi was just focused on tracking down that hidden dungeon the next day. But then Nara blurted out that she just wanted to get stronger. Choi was taken aback, wondering why the girl couldn't just slay some monsters to level up. We found out that poor Nara was left crying her eyes out again, job hunting in this economy. Yikes. But putting that aside, Nara asked Choi about her day, and Choi replied that nothing had changed. All her leads had dead-ended. It had been a whole month, and their lives were stalled like a broken record. So Choi decided it was time to eat and just forget about their worries for a bit. Nara lit up when she spotted her favorite dish, and they decided to throw a mini celebration and drink up. But with Nara fully unhinged now, she unleashed a tirade, cursing every employer under the sun, and wondering why the heck getting a job was such a monumental task. She had a light bulb moment. Maybe it was because she was just a lowly buffer. She was fed up and couldn't understand why she even chose. Choi was laser-focused on finding that hidden dungeon the next day. But then, suddenly, Nara blurted out that she just wanted to get stronger. Choi's jaw dropped. She couldn't believe her ears. Did Nara really think she could just take out monsters? Because she was just a buffer and a low-ranked one at that. She was grumbling about her life and questioning why she even awakened as a buffer. But on the flip side, Choi was already plotting to uncover the hidden dungeon the next day. But out of nowhere, Nara piped up that all she wanted was to get stronger. Choi was taken aback, wondering if the girl couldn't just take down some monsters too. She thought boosting her stats would do the trick, since it worked for her before. But Nar was crying buckets, telling Choi she wasn't even a fighter, and it would take her over 100 years to level up. And, hearing that Choi finally understood, there was nothing she could do to boost her power levels. Out of nowhere, fueled by all the drinks she had, Nar was green with envy over Choi's newfound strength. Nar started to ponder if it was due to some magical item Choi snagged from the hidden dungeon, wishing she could just level up and suddenly feel like a powerhouse herself. But Choi was stuck replaying all the horrifying experiences she'd gone through. Even when she wished for death, it just wouldn't cooperate. She found herself hating every miserable minute of leveling up. Meanwhile, Nar was convinced that if she could level up from just a single item like Choi did, she'd be in a top-notch guild in no time. In her mind, Choi was so lucky, but only Choi knew the truth behind her struggle. She remembered being swarmed by mantises unable to kick the bucket and just being treated as an endless buffet for those creepy crawlers, tormented time and again, even while wishing for a sweet escape. To her, Choi was not lucky at all. She had to get strong just to survive. Nar kept running her mouth, clueless about the reality. At that moment, Choi seriously contemplated taking Nar out right then and there. But Nar had no clue about all this, thinking that if she hit the jackpot, she'd be rolling in dough like all those other hunters. But suddenly, Choi asked if she genuinely thought the girl was lucky, and she was fuming now, thinking maybe Nar had totally lost her grip on reality for saying such nonsense. Nar quickly caught on to her mistake and started apologizing, saying she must have been out of her mind from the drinks. Now realizing how serious things were, she remembered narrowly escaping when Choi was on a rampage. And now, she had let slip things that should have stayed buried. Choi could pop her like a balloon any minute, and all Nar could do was panic. She found herself begging for mercy, claiming she'd really messed up. Thankfully, Choi wasn't as unhinged at that moment and understood Nar had no clue what really went down in the hidden dungeon. She just wanted the lady to finish her meal and never utter such nonsense again. For a bit, they shared a quiet meal, munching on their food. But then, Choi decided to spill the beans and started explaining how she'd almost kicked the bucket in the hidden dungeon. But along the way, she found that ring, though it didn't come with such a nifty ability. As she mentioned earlier, the only way to level up was to off a ton of monsters again and again. She had taken down so many she lost track. Even though it didn't seem logical, Nar couldn't wrap her head around how a tank was able to annihilate so many mantises when she wasn't a combat type. Plus, Choi popped out right after they sealed the gate. And now she claimed to have leveled up in such a short period. Nar was curious about what the heck happened to Choi to turn her into a powerhouse so fast. Choi calmly admitted she'd bitten the dust a ton of times, thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of times. No matter if her limbs were torn off or her head rolled away, she sprung back to life thanks to the ring. Even in moments of sheer despair, when she yearned for death, that option just wasn't on the table, so she kept powering up again and again. Nar was scratching her head, trying to make sense of what Choi was blabbering about. But Choi just wanted her to believe that she kept dying and fighting, and that's how she got strong back then. Choi loathed that process so much. She didn't want to be strong or possess some rare item. She couldn't fathom why she had to endure such suffering. But when she finally emerged after 1,000 years, time stood still, and her team was still lazing around in the same spot. Finally, Choi wrapped up the tale telling the lady this was how she became powerful, and Nar instantly realized that whatever she just heard was utterly bonkers. The girl had no clue that this was how one got stronger, and Nara quickly realized that whatever she'd overheard was totally off the wall.